Somebody go sleep.
We good?
Yeah, I think we're good. We're only 5 minutes late. What's that? I almost feel like Tom should.
I feel like
We can wait for Tom. We can
Yeah.
wait for Tom.
That's fine.
Tom gets the credit for inviting you to come talk with us.
He built half that hive, so it only makes sense.
You didn't do the introductions. You just got nominated. That's why you don't leave the room.
Darn it.
But we're good if you're good.
Yeah.
Everybody should be good to go.
Come on in.
Yeah, that would be good. Except for
I'm Tom Carter. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission, and we have Dan Watkins and Aaron Lass from Beeworks to do this presentation today about beekeeping and pollinator land management.
they've already just started, so.
Take it away.
Thank you, Tom. So I'm Dan, this is Aaron. We own and operate Beeworks, which is a small beekeeping company started here in Connecticut. We've moved much more into the landscaping for pollinators side of the business, as well as we are just trying to create a good ecosystem, a good environment for our local pollinators, for honeybees. And really what this presentation is about, and a lot of what we try and do is education and awareness to people with property that they can manage from as small as an eighth, a tenth of an acre, to a couple hundred acres. Everyone can make an impact in a positive way to help our pollinators, improve our ecosystem, and unlike a lot of other things with environmentalism, the changes don't need to be all that large. A lot of the changes are very minor with great benefit. We're going to run through a lot of the basics, as it says here today. There's a ton more in each single category that we're going to talk about, but just bringing awareness, bringing education and an open mind to what can be done with a little bit of land or a lot of land, whether you want to get into beekeeping, helping local pollinators, or just simply plant a garden for pollinators. We're just going to touch on a lot of the basics today. So we're going to start off with what brought us here, which is just the honeybee. A very fun presentation we have, and it takes like an hour and a half that we like to do for people, is the history of beekeeping with people. It's one of the things that fascinates me the most. Humans and honeybees go back 10,000 years. I believe the oldest known working apiary, what we would consider almost a commercial apiary by today's standards, is in Israel, and they found, I believe it was something like 36 hives strategically organized kind of into a hillside that was dated to, I believe, 7,000 BCE. So humans and bees we've been doing this song and dance forever. We don't know exactly where it started. It predates a lot of written language in most areas, but everywhere there's people, there's usually been the honeybee. Current scientific thought is that they originated in Southeast Asia, sweeping through a lot of Central Asia and into most of Northern Africa. Scientists haven't been able to pin down exactly where the honeybee originated, but the current thought is just a wide swath, pretty much right along the equator, a little bit north of it. And as far as honeybees go, they never made it across the Atlantic headed west, or the Pacific headed east from Asia to the Western Hemisphere where we are now, obviously. We know the boat they came over on, I believe it was 1621, headed to Virginia, was the first hive that we brought from Europe to North America. Yeah, that fun little tidbit. The North American indigenous people usually knew white European settlers were encroaching on their land, as swarms of honeybees would come through the forest before people. As I said, everywhere people went, we brought
We brought the
honeybees.
bees.
Um, it's super interesting. The honey itself borders on a superfood. You could almost live off of it, minus the high sugar content, which I'm sure would catch up with you after a while. But it doesn't go bad when you wait for the honey to be capped by the bees. It can be stored at infinitum. The expression a lot of people have heard and is accurate. They found honey well preserved in Egyptian pharaoh tombs, 2, 3, 4,000 years old, 100% edible to this day. That is absolutely true. If stored properly, harvested properly, it does not go bad. It may crystallize, it may become hard, but with just a little bit of heat, warm water, anything like that, it comes right back around. So yeah, there's about, as it says, 7 to 11 of species, honeybee species recognized out of the 20,000 plus species of bees in the world. I believe there is one other, it's not a honeybee, more of a solo mason bee, which is what a lot of our local pollinators are here in the Northeast. I believe it comes out of South America and does produce honeybee, honey. It's not labeled a honeybee because it only produces a teeny tiny amount of honey, really just enough for it to live off of day to day. The beauty of the honeybee, and I think a lot of people think it, and I'm fairly convinced of it, the reason we domesticated honeybees in the first place was
Everybody loves honey.
it's delicious. I mean, it was back before trade was common. You could really only eat what was around you. Spices probably weren't well known at the time, even if it was native to your area. That was still a lot of human figuring out what is and is not edible on the landscape. And if you open a jar of raw honey today, that's how it tasted 12,000 years ago, minus,
Differences in
the nectar content from the flowers that the bees would have pollinated. And that's
It's called liquid
delicious.
gold for a reason,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Like
delicious.
everybody that has like a jar of real raw honey, you feel rich. You do. You're like,
It's fun.
So it's been a integral part of our history.
Yeah. There's a lot of, like I said, the 7 to 11 species of honeybees is mostly companies like us and hobbyists would keep. We run what's known as an Italian honeybee. I think I've kept every domesticated version of a honeybee there is. There's slight differences in size, color, minor attributes after that. Some are better at potentially getting through cold weather. Some might produce honeycomb more, but they're all relatively the same, especially
Basically the
from
same
20
traits.
feet away.
Yeah.
Honeybees are going to look the same. You've seen one, you've seen the vast majority of them. There's some that are known as a darker bee. They are physically dark. You can kind of see here. These would be Italian honeybees.
These are Italians.
The bands would be more black. The whole body would be physically a little blacker, but overall, pretty much all honeybees look pretty
Like
much
this.
the same.
They look
Yeah,
like this.
exactly. So, what kind of hive to run? And we'll back up a little bit with this. Honeybees love to live mostly in hollow trees. In Southeast Asia, you'll see a lot of like cliff-dwelling honeybees where a rock overhang will be turned into a large single comb. That comb can be as much as 10, 15 feet wide, 6, 7 feet long. We really don't get anything like that over here. I believe that's the giant honeybee. It
Yeah.
really doesn't leave Southeast Asia.
But they'll find, basically any cavity.
Baseball games?
Baseball games.
They
as
like
it turns
baseball
out.
games,
They
as
like
it turns
baseball.
out.
But basically, like any kind of dark, enclosed area that they find that they like, they'll happily occupy.
Yeah.
Hence, I'm sure you guys have all seen videos of people catching swarms and stuff out of the backs of trucks and out of the sides of houses and
Baseball games.
So yeah, we try to make nice homes for them that they like to stay in, but on occasion they just go find their own joint. Usually it's a hollow in a tree somewhere.
Yeah, talk about the gray hive. Then we'll get to the wing stuff at the end.
Okay, so the first kind of hive that we're gonna talk about is the were hive, and it's named after a French monk. Oddly enough, a lot of like our beekeeping that we have now.
That's the darker one. on
Yeah,
top
the
left.
tall one. A lot of our beekeeping that, like, our methodology, the original science that we have now, a lot of it actually came from like monks. You know, the kind that we run came from a reverend. It was a kind of lovely thing that they had the opportunity originally in a lot of these like abbeys and such to be able to do a lot of naturalistic study, and lucky for us, a fair amount of them actually really, really focused on honeybees and contributed a lot of really great science. So this is one of them, the tall one, the tall dark one in the photo there.
Still very popular in Europe, where it first came from. You'll see a lot of these
Yeah,
in Western Europe,
Yeah.
particularly England, France. I see a lot of these run there.
yep,
They're all somewhat the same. Every man-made hive, every synthetic hive is going to be built around the principles of bee space. So a bee space is if a space is too small or too large, the bee is going to adapt and modify that space. Anything under a quarter inch is physically too small. They don't like it. They're going to usually put a bunch of propolis in, fill it up. They can't physically get into that space. Much over 3/8, that space is too large, and they will neck that down with honeycomb. So it's very small parameters that you're working with, and it's just based off the physical size of the bee, how they like to use that space, because they want to build as much comb as possible. That's where they put pollen, nectar. That's where the eggs are laid and hatched. So the whole thing is based around a tiny amount of space. And then we just have a bunch of different ways to keep bees.
yeah,
You have the ware hive. The top bar hive is kind of seeing a resurgence in popularity. I see a lot of these right now.
yeah.
Single long box. In this box, see that cutout in the long horizontal side? That's where the frames would go, right over
Really
that.
window.
And you really just put a little wooden bar on top. The bees are going to draw out the comb. They're going to, again, modify that bee space to their own particular happiness, to what, is most efficient for the hives. As it says, foundationless beekeeping. It puts the most work on the bees. We run right here in front of us what's known as a Langstroth hive. As Aaron pointed out, it was invented by a reverend in the 1850s. Most of his work, interestingly enough, on beehives was actually done in Greenfield, Mass. There's a cool
There's like a
statue and a little park
They have a whole
dedicated to him.
festival
Yep.
every year.
His work was published, I believe, when he was in Philadelphia
I
or
think so.
Pittsburgh, one of those. So it's kind of the two areas share the claim to fame of the Langstroth hive. There's not much like the different varieties of bees. There's no perfect hive to run. It's all a pros and cons list. We really like
Yeah.
the Langstroth hive.
It's about your preferences of how you like to work.
Yeah. So this is basically how it works. We start off with a roof. That's obvious. It just keeps the weather out.
Yeah.
The bees really don't like sunlight, and they really don't like the weather getting
Not
into it.
inside.
So as you can see, this box is physically narrower than this box. We run what's known as a deep hive body and a medium honey super. So this is a new honey super to this year. Actually made that top. These are new frames. We can pass a couple along if you guys want to see them, or come up at the end. This would be a drawn out frame. So you can see the beauty of this. It's not foundationless beehives. This is what a brand new frame would look like. You buy it in pieces, you assemble it yourself. This is just a hard plastic, double coated in beeswax. The thing I like about this is two things. comb. So if you get an infestation of one of these pests, they're not gonna ruin all your comb. This gives the bees a jumping off point. The comb is 3D printed in the exact spacing they like. Cause the rule of thumb, and I don't think it's exact, but it's close enough to get the idea, is that to get from this frame to this frame is as much resources as it is to fill this frame with honey. So we really don't destroy comb at Beeworks. We won't scrape it back when we harvest
We try
honey.
to preserve as much
Absolutely
of the
not,
comb
because then the
as
bees have to make
possible.
all this again and fill it with honey to get the same result, when if you're just very delicate uncapping, you're not gonna have that issue, and the bees literally have half the work to do. So you can tell, yeah, see this one, all this would probably be a little bit of wax moth damage that we had to scrape back. And you can see sometimes the spacing isn't right, because you have what's known as just burr comb
Mhm.
on the bottom of the frames, and that's just the bees telling you,
There's too much space
I don't
down
like
here.
space. Yep, I don't like it.
Just fill it.
So what's interesting about Langstroth hive that you can't do in a top bar hive, but you can do in a ware hive, although I don't see it nearly as much. The beauty of what we do is with Langstroth hive is the bees want to fill from the bottom up. So if you've got honey up here, you've got more honey in the bottom. Once this is filled, it needs to go. Two things will happen. If you don't give them more space, the bees will swarm. The bees need somewhere to put food, resources away, lay eggs, and if the hive physically fills up, honeybees reproduce with what's known as asexual reproduction. So half the hive leaves, takes the old queen with it. Literally, that's the baseball game, the stuff on the back of a car. That's a swarm. And then the other half will stay behind to rear a new queen, start again.
And go again.
But the beauty of like a Langstroth, a ware hive, there's any what's known as just box beehives, is that we can put a honey super on top, run what's known as a queen excluder. This is a strategically engineered metal screen that the worker bees can fit through back to the bee space. But the queen bee, being the physically largest bee in the hive, cannot get through this. So she's not going to come up here, lay eggs, or anything like that. So when you harvest honey out of a Langstroth hive, you're not destroying brood, you're not destroying eggs. You can literally take this honey without hurting a single bee, egg, or larva. We try to take a minimal impact. Those of you that have especially watched us work hives in peak summer. There's a lot of bees. Every once in a while you squish a bee. We try your hardest not to, but peak summer, there's going to be upwards of 100,000 bees per
Yeah.
hive. So while you don't want to devalue that one single life, you also cannot fuss.
You'd never be
Every-
able to like
you
open
can never
or
keep
close
bees.
a hive again.
There's too much to do. So we run a queen excluder. Queen can't physically get up there.
That's
But
the
she will
least
be.
amount of impact that we can have on the bees.
Down here somewhere.
Yeah.
As you can see, this is a new, what we would call brood frame. This is a drawn out one. And then for comparison, you can physically see the size difference of the two. Stop it. The only reason we run mediums is the Northeast does not have the longest growing season. If you see beekeepers in the South, really anywhere southeast through southwest,
Sometimes their boxes will be this tall.
and they'll run these hive bodies as honey supers.
Yeah.
They just have a much longer growing season. They make more honey than us.
More resources to
It
put
is.
away.
It is what it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Because as we were saying, if you harvest too early and there's a lot of water content in the hive, which sometimes you kind of get stuck with. If the season runs out and they weren't able to cap it all, you have a kind of decision on your hand, but they have more of a likelihood of what we would just call covering it with wax, which is their way of, they put a wax coating on the comb, which prevents moisture from seeping back in, which can cause it to ferment. So if it's all capped, you're probably going to be good to harvest. But down here would be kind of the engine room of the beehive. This is where the worker bees are, the queen's laying eggs. I've read reports, and I think we get a hive every once a year. The queen can lay up to 1,500 eggs a day. She's a very hard worker.
She's working.
There's nurse bees entrance reducer right there. Peak summer, every once in a while you get hives so big that
Just open it.
it's run just like
Yeah.
that. And it's like, I don't know, downtown New York on a Friday afternoon. It is non-stop bees coming and going from here.
Yeah.
We run on the bottom a slightly modified lower. We run a screen bottom, so in the summer they have excellent
Ventilation.
ventilation. And then through the back, we can slip a whiteboard in and out. And it's just a piece of plastic that goes all the way in, hits up here. And shameless advertising. And that would add, like we put those in during right now, colder
When it's
weather,
a little cooler,
tiny
it
bit
helps
more
it
insulation.
heat in. It also gives us a chance to monitor what's going on in the hives. Like, you can monitor, say, varroa infestations and whatever, because a lot of times when the mites die, they'll fall, they'll hit the whiteboard. And so there are certain ways that you can measure, you know, like what your mite load might be from the whiteboard. So that's another reason that we like to use those in particular.
And there's a lot of other types of hives. These are like kind of the three
These
big
are
ones
the
right
most
now.
popular ones right
There's
now.
honestly dozens. It's fun to watch.
Yeah.
So, beekeeping basics. Obviously, bees are like any other creature. They need a particular set of habitat to thrive in. Now that we know that they're not from the Western Hemisphere, although a lot of our climates do replicate
They're similar.
Southeast Asia through Northern Africa, here in the Northeast is definitely not one of those. They don't love winter, so we have a lot of extra work to do to get bees through the winter, but providing them with what they need. So our start into this was building beehives. We have a sawmill, we mill all our own lumber, we have our own wood shop, we make all our own hives. The beauty of making our own hives and being beekeepers is as long as we understand bee space, we can make changes to the hives that better the beekeeper. Like our handles are, we were one of
made
the
a lot of our
first
own
ones to run this style of handle. You know, we're just physically able to pick up boxes easier in
These
the
get
field without
heavy.
issues.
Like these boxes sometimes will be 60 or 70 pounds apiece.
Easy.
They get heavy when they're full.
Hives in July and August can easily be over 100 pounds.
Like
each.
one of
Easily.
these will easily be 60 pounds if it's full and capped.
Yeah.
So handles are nice.
Strong handles.
Yeah.
Our roofs we make ourselves. I took an early, it just bothered me when I first got into beekeeping. Beekeeping to me was like people that like found paint in the corner of their neighbor's garage, slapped paint all over the beehives, stuck them out in the middle of the woods, and like shunned them. And I love the honeybee way too much to treat them like that. So I really wanted to make the nicest looking hive I could. I wanted to celebrate the wood. I wanted to give the bees just a nice place to be. So a lot of what we do is building the hive for what they need to be the most successful while trying to make it
Better the beekeeping experience.
something to be proud of. We
Yeah.
try to call it garden art. I don't know if we quite get there, but we get close. The forage in all of this one is where we're headed. My background is actually in trees. That's where my college degrees come from. Still do tree work to this day. And it's what led us to the pollinator landscaping that we're gonna get to. The more I kept bees, I kind of realized, we're in a drought. There's no flowers for the bees. Or we had a late frost. The flowers got tinged from a cold night, and now there's no flowers for the bees, the pollinators. So it really just got me thinking about 5 years ago, what can we do? What can we do to help our pollinators? Because I have an interest in helping honeybees, but to zoom out, be more inclusive on the whole landscape is really where the genesis of the pollinator landscaping started, is what can we do to help our pollinators? And the main issues affecting them are habitat loss and climate change, and chemical use. Chemical use is an easy one for me. I don't usually spend too much time talking on it because most people kind of get it. Those
Yeah.
that don't, I really don't think are going to change their minds, so I'm really not going to worry about that one. I think we all know at least a couple people that just love throwing them around.
Lots of
It is what it is,
Yeah.
you know, it's not illegal. I have opinions, but it's neither here nor there. Habitat loss is a big one. Mostly, we aren't known for development over here like say the southwest or the northwestern part of this country. But it's still an issue here. I run up against cultural norms way more, whether
Yeah.
it's mowing practices,
Fall cleanups.
fall
is a big
cleanups
one.
is hard on our native pollinators because most of them like to overwinter in either stems of branches and twigs that have fallen on the ground,
Leaf litter.
leaf litter, mud, something like that. So really, again, like we said in the beginning, education is such a key part, and it's not like we have to turn every square inch of every town into the nicest meadow you've ever seen. Little details, like say you mow every 7 days, just bump that out to 9 or 10. I understand some places, HOAs, something like that, there's guidelines, do what you gotta do, that's not the issue. But not mowing quite as much, letting it go a little bit taller. Dandelions in your yard, I think are awesome. Merely tolerate them if you don't think so. Particularly early fall, or early spring, late fall, and peak summer, flowers are not abundant. You know, we're just about headed into our spring honey run right now, so now through really early July,
Yeah.
I don't worry about our pollinators. They're gonna be okay. Something
stuff
is
out
always in flower. But March and April, you know, November, and then say 2020,
The selection is a
2022,
lot less.
we had drought years.
Yep.
July and August is really hard on our pollinators there, because even if you'll have a flower on a plant, it might not be making nectar. We have found many cases where flowers will be out because we don't have enough water coming from
Especially during the drought
the
years.
environment.
There are flowers
may have a
out,
flower
but they're
that's
not putting honey away.
basically
There's no
sterile.
nectar.
So really figuring out what we can do to help them through these practices are really gonna help. And then the approach we took with the pollinator landscaping was everyone loves plants. Most people love plants. Most people love flowers. I totally get seasonal allergies. But to zoom out a little bit from a strictly plant perspective, because the beauty of pollinator landscaping is you get your landscape that looks just as good as any other landscape, but now you're benefiting all the insects in your area. So zooming out from, because I felt trapped in this for years, being an arborist. What's best for the tree? Just the tree, just the tree. We're trying to zoom out a lot more to be as all-encompassing as possible. And like I said, there's no downside. It doesn't cost anymore. If you're gonna landscape either a whole property from a blank slate, say new construction or something like that, to just putting in a simple bed. It doesn't take any more money, time, maybe a little bit more energy to do a little bit of research on what plants you could plant, whether it's native or an early flowering tree, shrub, or wildflower meadow, something of those lines, to help our pollinators. So as it says, plant for pollinators, right place, right plant, right time. We always try to use the mantra of and.
And
To use a quick example, it's like, I wanna plant a tree in my front yard. And? What do you wanna do with that tree? What's the point of it? Oh, well, maybe I wanna plant a tree so that on the southern side of my house, so that in peak summer, the sun's physical rays aren't hitting my house as high. It'll cast more shade, I won't have to use as much electricity to cool the house down, or if you don't have AC, my house won't physically get as hot. Great, well, let's make it a deciduous tree. Because if you plant an evergreen, when you want that sun's rays in winter, you're not gonna get it, because that passive solar gain in the winter will help warm your house. So, okay, we're gonna plant a deciduous tree in the front lawn and the south side of the house. And let's make it pollinator friendly. And we're already planting a tree, how hard is it? Great, we'll plant a native, we can plant, say, a red maple and a tulip tree. Both pollinators adore. We were watching maples literally just today covered with our
They
honeybees.
really do love the maples.
Being a working arborist, this is where this beauty comes in. Red maple, while it can get to 60 feet, most of them top out somewhere around 40, 45. A tulip tree can be 110 feet tall. I have run chainsaws in people's living room before. It's not fun. When a storm comes through 80 years from now, because you planted a tulip tree 20 feet from your house and some really bad storm caused by climate change, it's getting worse, cuts your house in half. It looks like a natural disaster, but unfortunately it easily could have been avoided with a simple discussion. An environmental disaster, because now you gotta bring in carpenters, electricians, plumbers, roofers, painters, the landscapers are coming back to do it all over again. And to just have a little bit of forethought of what you're doing can save an environmental disaster down the road and benefit if you're out in front of this. So that's why we always just try to say, and. What more can we do in every situation to maximize what we're doing? So like I said, you know, at the nursery, 4, 6-inch caliper tree, 10, 15 feet tall. Most of them are relatively in the same price range, but just having that discussion, right plant, right place, makes a huge difference down the road.
You also
For our
just
pollinators,
have less environmental inputs to put into that plant.
like not
If
planting a
you
sugar
put-
maple under the power lines.
Right.
Yeah.
If you put a plant where it wants to be, then once that plant is established, it'll take less maintenance, it'll take less resources to keep it healthy. It'll produce on its own. They take care of themselves very well when they have what it is that they need, i.e. right plant, right place.
So when we're dealing with most clients, all we really want to do, one of the key components I think to everyone is somewhat of a low maintenance landscape. We're all super busy. You know, no one wants to come out, plant the wrong plant, even if it's in the right place. But if you do both of them wrong plant, it's gonna dedicate a lot, you're gonna have to
It
put a
takes a
lot of
lot of
time
effort
into
to live
dealing with
plants
this
alone.
one issue that you now have somewhat of a sunk cost fallacy going on, because you've already paid money for it, but at which point do you cut your losses and run, or do you keep pursuing somewhat of a bad idea? So that's what we're always trying to do, is just try our best, as I say, to put flowers on the ground and honey in your hand. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. Utilize space for micro meadows. That's kind of what we're known for. A little outside of the box traditional landscaping. We plant from seed a lot. We do all the traditional landscaping, but we really like to do meadows. I think they're one of the most environmentally friendly landscapes. To some degree, every property has maintenance that needs to be done with it. You're gonna need to bring a well drilling rig onto your property at some point to replace your well. If you're on septic, that's gonna need to get dug up at some point. The problem with a lot of traditional landscaping is you have established plants in the landscape that now you either have to work around, you either have to cut down, or you have to dig up and move. Either way, very costly, very expensive, and again, environmentally damaging. Multiple crews, multiple trucks, days of work. The beauty of a meadow is once it's established, if you have a lot of work to do, you can just mow it, drive all over it, do what you need to do for work, come back the following planting season, replant. It's like no one was ever there. So you don't have these large input costs to have little changes, like maybe you just want to get your house painted or something like that. We deal with this a lot with the tree side of things. Covering up trees and shrubs right next to houses, because paint gets on leaves, it's gonna kill them, it's hard on the plant. So just a lot of cultural norms that we're trying to alleviate. I think we all understand the big side of environmentalism. I'm not gonna be the one to solve a single of those problems, but I do think a lot of little changes by some of us could really help alleviate a lot of stressors that we're dealing with. Yeah, so like I said before, anything from an 1/8 of an acre, raised beds, potted plants on the front yard, along a walkway, to big wildflower meadows, trees, shrubs.
Kind of the whole point of this is that we want everyone to feel like and understand that, you know, everyone and every property can make a difference, and it doesn't take much. I mean, even if you live in an apartment, if you have access to a window and you have window boxes, that is providing forage for pollinators. In fact, urban beekeeping is huge.
Yeah, it's very popular.
And so, you know, we just want people to, because the whole thing, the whole
and it's fun.
It's super fun.
I think a lot of people are into plants to some degree. Again, like I said earlier, I don't really know anyone that doesn't like looking at either a nice tree in the landscape, a nice flowering shrub, a meadow. And I think the reason we're here in this room, people like honeybees. There's something in every one of us, I'm somewhat convinced, that wants to talk about, wants to see, wants to be around. There's something very human about being around honeybees. They can be scary. They do sting. I get all of that. But
it
there's
like goes back into
all
our
we do
folklore.
every single day of our lives is talk about honeybees to
That's
everyone
true.
we meet.
It's true.
The doors of the trucks are barely open, and people are like, "How are the bees? How are they doing?" It just, people care. So I find a lot of inspiration. As Aaron said, sometimes the horizon is a little bleak, but I don't know, pollinators, honeybees, they to me bring a lot of positivity to not just us, but to a lot of people. Most of our clients really enjoy just watching them, just seeing them. It's really neat to have an insect. You can't really call it domesticated. It's like a weird in between.
Lines.
Yeah, like it's
It's technically
government
considered
defines it
agriculture.
as a domesticated animal, but I don't think so.
But,
Like,
you know,
it's
you
a rather
can't-
wild
you can't- It's not like a dog where you can be like, sit and stay.
Yeah, no,
You know,
never.
They do what they want to do. We're
that would
kind
make
of
our
along
lives
for
a
the ride.
lot easier if we could figure that out. There'd be a lot less work.
It would change things.
Yeah, it'd be a lot less work. But it's really fun. I would suggest anyone that has ever thought about getting into honeybees, beekeeping, anything like that, do it. Find someone doing it.
There are clubs all over the place.
They're super fun. They're really rewarding. It is a lot of work. It is hard, but it's a fun, noble hobby to pursue. So yeah, that's kind of the basics of the whole thing.
Questions?
Yeah, questions?
So if I wanted to start, where would I get the bees from? Do I have
The
to
bees?
attract them and steal them or something?
If you want to be super old school about it, yes.
That is the way.
You could be a honeybee hunter. That used to be an actual thing. And
Mhm.
there were people in the villages that were designated honeybee hunters that would see them and follow them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's much easier for you.
It's gotten better. We've gotten better at this.
There are several ways that you can get honeybees. When we're starting up a new hive, we order what's called packages, and they come in, we get 3-pound packages, and it comes in a little box. It's super weird. So they come in a little box, and it's shaped kind of like a shoebox, and it's on 4 sides it's wood, and on the 2 long sides it's screen. And what comes in that box is a little additional box with a queen in it and a couple of her nurseries. And then it's got a can of sugar water feed. And what they do is they do it by weight, a 3-pound package. So they put the queen and the feed in there, and then they weigh out 3 pounds worth of honeybees, and they plunk them in that box.
I don't know how they do that.
I don't either, and that's how we get them. So then we install them into their homes, and they can thrive and expand. That's how we
There's
prefer to do it.
A bunch of local guys that offer packages. There's all the big retailers online. You can get them
You can
from.
order them.
You can get them from us.
Yeah, there's another way called nukes. And that's kind of a more established, basically you're getting like a small hive.
A nuke is either a 4 or 5
Yeah,
frame
it's like a
hive.
5-frame
So
hive.
it'll be like this wide. They
So-
usually don't run full deeps.
No.
It'll be like medium.
Yeah.
But it's got a little roof. It's got a bottom.
But that's basically a queen that's already laying,
Yeah.
like she's already been, so queens have a certain pheromone that their colony attracts to. And so when we install our packages, what we do is the reason she's in a separate little cage is if the worker bees don't recognize her pheromone, they'll kill her because she's a foreign queen. So we leave her in her little box inside the hive to give them a little bit extra time to get acquainted with her pheromone before we release her into the hive.
So they get to know each other.
Yeah, it's just a bigger introductory period. But when you're getting a nuke, all that's already done. So basically, she's already laying, like you're gonna have some frames that already have brood.
cost a little more, packages are cheaper.
Yeah,
Early on, myself included, you start with nukes because it takes a whole step of the equation right out of it that you don't have to figure out. But I haven't bought a nuke in
in a
8 or 10
while,
years
yeah.
because we do a lot of installing,
Yeah,
so we've gotten pretty good at that.
yeah.
Questions?
What about bears?
Electric fences and
around
really good
every
ones.
single one. That's like half of our job.
Half of our
unfortunately.
day-to-day is vegetation management,
Yep. and
i.e.
fence
weed whipping
maintenance. Yeah.
around apiaries, because every blade of grass, every twig, anything that touches that wire and touches the ground is grounding your fence out. It doesn't take as much electricity to keep a bear out as you would think. It's not a little amount, but it's not
It
as
gives
bad
them-
as you
it
would
gives
think.
them a reasonable.
And you just gotta run it all the time. Like I was actually just up in Great Barrington on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen one of these for a while, but man, a bear dug up a side of one of my fences. I mean, the
He was
earth was
trying.
all scraped back. He dug down about a full foot. He, she, I don't know. I wasn't there. But man, I showed up and it was a mess. It didn't get through. It was pushing on the wire. One of the insulators was broke. The wire was all mangled, but it held the line. Those bees were fine.
So it is unfortunately a very important part of
gotta do it.
apiaries in the
You gotta do
Northeast.
it.
We have to have them. Yep.
What do you do in the winter?
A lot of stuff.
So we're constantly trying new overwintering techniques, but kind of the basic stuff that we do. One of the most important things that we have found that you must do is deal with blocking them from the wind. The wind will suck the heat out of the hive so fast.
You want to keep the hive at
like
it's just
95,
under 100 degrees inside the hive year round. It's
Yeah.
quite warm.
Yeah, so in the winter, they tend to ball up, body heat, and they all vibrate, and it helps keep them warm. But, the boxes, there's cracks and stuff, so a lot of times wind will get through, and it just pulls the heat right out. So we run on our hives, we run
As
insulation.
Apis calls them.
They're winter jackets. It's that bubble insulation that we use, and we get ones that are black on the outside and then reflective on the inside. We've actually had really good success with that. That seems to help a whole lot. We keep the whiteboards in. We have a winter feed that we give them, because obviously you can't leave liquid out in the freezing temperatures. It'll just be ice. So we have like a hard sugar thing that we make up so that they have food in the hive
We
to
have
make sure that
proprietary winter cover that we make
that's
that gives them a little extra space up top that they need.
yeah.
They go in greenhouses, they
We
go
put
in
them in-
barns,
yeah.
some stay outside. We're always trying different things
Always trying new stuff
to
because
get better.
overwintering is one of the biggest challenges for bees in New England. Everything else you can kind of get a pretty good handle on, but winter is one, wildly unpredictable, and two, we'll have hives that'll, go into winter really super strong and, die out during the winter. They've got food in the hive, they've
It's
got honey
frustrating.
in the hive, they just, whatever. And then we've also had hives that, going into winter, we're like, "Ugh, you're pretty small, I don't know." And they'll come out in the spring and they're just like, "We did it!
Yeah.
We did it!"
And you guys are tough around here, like Colebrook,
Oh.
Norfolk,
Yeah, the ice box.
Winchester up on the hill.
Living up here in the ice box.
You guys get cold and windy, like a lot of places we do not deal with. So
Yeah.
it can change so much, just town to town, location to location,
Yeah,
hill to hill.
it's true.
Like a lot of our hives we'll refer to as down the valley, Granby, Simsbury, that whole area.
Had to be a lot easier.
Way easier to get bees just 10 miles away than right up here.
Yeah.
It's significantly easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a couple questions.
Shoot.
Okay.
One of them is, so if we have a nice meadow, when is the best for the bees, of course, we're prioritizing now, the time to mow?
Rotational mowing.
So tell me about that, like what
If you only have one field, I would, because you have to mow. If you don't mow,
Yeah, yeah,
especially
have to.
around here,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
forest is gonna take it back.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I would either mow, depending on the size of it, half and half. Like if you mowed one now through the spring, stop mowing it in like June, let it go for the rest of the year and rotated it. Or if you want to mow it all at once, like what we do with our wildflower fields, is after the first hard frost and when soil temperatures are below 45, because that keeps any seed from germinating. So again, you're just trying to replicate the natural systems. You've got the seeds up in the pods, whatever the flower kind of is. And if you come in and mow, especially in like September or early October, the soil is warm enough, the ambient is warm enough, that seed's gonna grow. And unfortunately, it will never get big enough to survive a winter around here. So if you're gonna mow once a year, I would say late fields, when we do that, take management because you have saplings that are gonna start to grow on them. Like, I like to mow kind of through May, because that'll take the samaras from the maple trees, they're gonna wanna sprout, you'll see those in your yard, the birch, all the stuff. So if you don't mow at all in the spring, which a lot of our fields don't, you will, through the growing year, see the trees start to grow up. If you can go out and get to them, pull them out of the ground, we keep long, what we just call long reach with us. They're like 6 to 8 foot poles with just a cutting tip on it, so you can just reach out real quick, just pop it, because obviously if you're walking through a field, you're trampling a bunch of grass. At the very least, it ruins the aesthetics of it, plus could also be taking flowers out. To some degree, a lot like the hives, there is no perfect solution.
Yeah, essentially just not during the high season. So you could mow, even if you wanted to mow twice a year,
Yeah.
your field, you could mow early spring and then like late in the fall and still get your two.
And the problem is you
season
never
mows.
know. So like a year like last year when it never stopped raining,
Oh,
Yeah.
you could have mowed whenever, but it's too wet to get something out there.
Yeah.
But then in like 22, when we had a bad drought, because I always try to time my last spring mow. Sometimes I'll mow as late as like first week of July, and it's still way too tall come the fall. But sometimes I'll say mow like in a drought year, which we don't know it's coming until you're well into
Until
it.
you're into it.
And I'll mow, say the second week of June, and that was already way too late. The grass will never get more, your field will never get more than 8, 10 inches, because again, back to what we were talking about, that moisture just isn't there. So unfortunately, not knowing the future weather, which we could solve a lot of problems if we did.
We'd be millionaires if we could.
So something like that. On our bigger estates, the bigger properties where we're the land managers on with multiple fields, we'll mow a whole field and whenever they want, but just don't cut that one. You know what I mean? The more you have, the more rotational you can do. I'm always a little bummed when someone comes in. It depends. If you're doing it for other livestock, whether it's alfalfa
Yeah,
for
I mean, if you have other
livestock,
needs,
that's not the point of it.
specific needs,
but if you're doing it for the pollinators, try to always keep some field as close to maturity as possible. The bigger the field, the easier it'll be to either compartmentalize. You could do that again with a nice hedge break of planting some trees that are good for pollinators, to delineate maybe one field into 2, or just keep a mowed path. Having had Lyme disease a few times, I don't love walking through tall grass fields. So I usually mow like a walking path
Yeah.
through it, so you can enjoy it. You can get right up against it, but nobody wants to be covered in ticks. That's gross.
that's gross.
So, and then the other question I had was, I read The Queen and I. Do you know that book?
I haven't read
I
that one.
haven't read that one.
That's a great book. I don't know who's by it, but it's called The Queen and I. And I met the guy, he's an older guy, and this was probably about 5 or 7 years ago. So I don't even know if he's alive anymore, but it was a really lovely book about beekeeping. And he told
get bees,
Oh,
but
you
we do
can-
all the
you
work.
help?
We do everything.
Oh.
No.
I see, we missed the first part.
Fail.
That's what we do.
Bees use the box for shelter and just not produce the honey? Would they be attracted to just using it for a shelter, like a bumblebee or something?
No,
They
because
wouldn't?
Oh, it's all.
pretty much all of our bumblebees are ground nesters.
Oh, okay.
They don't
um,
produce like a true comb. Like
Yeah,
this.
honeybees are pretty unique in their comb structure. So there are other ones like, leaf cutter bees or sweat bees, a lot of them will also overwinter. Have you seen those, like bee hotels, right? So
Yes.
people are
It's a bunch of
producing bee
tubes
hotels and
in like a
it's like
wood
pieces of
box.
bamboo and stuff.
Yeah.
So those are more for like our solitary bees, like mason bees, like the leaf cutter bees, they'll find those and they'll overwinter in there, but this is actually pretty unique to just the honeybees.
Just the honey.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple other comb brews. You have
Well,
what are hornets and wasps? They're like
yeah,
accidental pollinators, but obviously they make
incidental pollinators.
yeah, they make like a comb type thing too, but
Yeah,
not
but they're not
quite
the
the
same
same.
as
No.
this. No, they'll come in and raid this and take resources, but they won't live here.
I think one of the more intimidating factors for us is like the whole idea of viruses and mites and all sorts of other illness that can get. Do you guys find that that's a big part of your, or just a
Oh,
small
yeah.
fraction?
It is,
Oh, no, it's a
it
big
is
part
a
of it.
regular part of our beekeeping. You have to make it a part of your normal routine, if you will,
Mhm.
with beekeeping.
The mite particularly.
Yeah, the varroa mites are kind of the biggest one that is a constant. But it's not a terribly difficult process once you know what you're doing.
A lot of the viruses too come on the back, almost quite literally, of the mite.
Yeah,
So if you can mitigate the mite,
yeah.
like deformed wing disease, a lot of the paralysis, stuff like that, you won't have, or you'll have it at such a minor level where you might not even notice it and it won't impact the whole hive. The varroa mite is extreme. Its name is the varroa
Yeah.
destructor. It is extremely hard on the honeybee.
There are
So you do
unfortunately no
have to
ways
treat to that to some degree, or that is a guaranteed lost hive.
Yeah.
And there's no place left on earth. Australia just found
They did.
varroa last year. They were the last continent not to have it. It's there now.
It's there.
Welcome to the club. We'll teach them how to do
We'll
it.
teach you how to do
You,
it.
you gotta deal with that one,
Yeah.
particularly going into winter. If you don't do anything going into winter for varroa, that hive will not make spring. That's a guarantee.
Yeah.
So you'd be able to manage it.
Yeah,
Yeah, oh yeah.
absolutely. There are several different ways that people prefer that they try. We use ourselves one method in particular that we like. Like I said, it's not terribly difficult. It's also not very expensive, which is fantastic.
It is one of the more intimidating things we hear from a lot of hobbyists or new
Yeah.
beekeepers is, what do I do?
Yeah,
They just don't want to make a mistake, and I totally appreciate that and understand it.
yeah,
But it's not that daunting, and I will say this, if you're gonna get into bees, just know you're gonna lose hives.
yeah.
If
It's
you don't
inevitable.
lose a hive and you keep bees for 30 years, write a book, you're gonna be a millionaire. Like, hives are going to die no matter what you do. I don't think it should be taken lightly. I don't think it should get easier seeing a whole hive die. I still absolutely hate it. It's one of the things that drives me the most and the hardest to be better every single year. But it's a fact of life. You're gonna lose hives. It just happens.
The guy is Edward Weiss, if anyone's interested in that book.
Thank you.
I looked it up, is it the Queen and I? Yes.
Is it from England?
It's, the guy lived in Connecticut.
Okay.
He was like a beekeeper here.
Because one of my favorite anecdotes about honeybees comes from England, but particularly
Yeah.
Western Europe, where
Go
few of
tell
you
the
know
bees.
the telling of the bees.
Yeah.
It's an old historical bad luck charm for beekeepers, if you have bees, to not tell your bees the good and the bad things that happen to your family.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it looks like a
Right,
university.
like there's been times where people have to go and tell the hives when somebody died.
Exactly, exactly.
When someone got
In fact,
married.
The latest one was the Queen, when she went, the royal
The Queen
beekeeper had
passed
to go tell
Last year, the
bees
royal
told them all of it.
Every day.
All the juicy
Every day
stuff.
go out and tell your bees.
You go
That
out, you tell
was
your
bad
bees
luck
about
not
your
to.
day, good stuff,
Yeah.
bad stuff, and the bees kept the balance
We're-
in the universe.
It's hand in glove. We're intertwined. As long as there's people, there will be bees. If we
Yeah.
lose bees, in my opinion, there won't be people. We are intertwoined forever. You can't separate us.
They help, you know, keep you in Gigi.
Yeah.
You just have to put up a little TV inside the hive.
Live stream the news right into them. I like it. I like it. Any other questions?
Anybody else?
Yep.
Sure. Like with this setup here, how would you get honey? All I can think of is smoking.
Exactly, so when we
Top box
take
comes
this
off.
little box here, we take it, you gotta smoke, that is correct.
We go frame by
And
frame.
then we go frame by frame and make sure that all the bees are off, and then you
We have
have
little
to
brushes. We sweep the
very
bees off.
promptly get
Run
this
away with that
inside
honey.
somewhere as fast as you can, because they always find it. Always. So yeah, it's kind of a thing to get it off the hive. Once you get that far, it's pretty easy.
We literally just take like a kitchen fork.
We are super high tech.
Shocking. I know.
We rock and roll with forks. And basically, when they fill these, like you said, no, we don't have any captain open. So they'll cover this whole thing with like, there's in the picture there,
A
there's,
wax.
yeah. Okay.
Is it that one?
Yeah.
Well, that's comb. That's brewed comb. But it
But
looks a
it's
lot like
kind
that.
of like that. So it'll, all this will be covered. So basically what we do is we take our little forks and we very lightly scrape this to just remove that covering. And then we have a centrifugal spinner. So we put these vertically in the spinner, and once it's full, you turn it on and it spins, and it basically, it uses centrifugal force to pull all the honey out, which is how we're able to maintain our pristine comb, is that like we're not going in there for the honey, it's being pulled out, and all of this is just good to go again. It can go directly back into another hive.
If you don't have like a, we'll just call it a spinner, an electric
Yeah.
spinner. My first like 2 years beekeeping, I'd uncap it with a fork and just put it one-sided down on a cookie sheet.
Gravity,
And
baby.
just like gravity drain it onto a cookie sheet, put it over a bigger bowl, take a spatula. It's very labor intensive, but it works. You don't.
Beekeeping is very sticky.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. That's a given.
All the time.
That's a given. But yeah. So, any questions?
Do you sell your honey?
Nope.
We do not. Our model is a little bit different. The people that we keep bees for, they get all of the honey that comes out of their hives. So basically, each hive or apiary is bespoke to that particular area or yard.
Yeah, it was one of the things I wanted to do early on, and again, not to waste everyone's time, but I didn't agree with a lot of the bigger beekeeping companies when they got their start. They put their value on honey, selling honey. And again, to me, the honeybee is way too important, way too cool and creative and just fun to study to value it at something it produces for its own food. So our tagline is literally more than honey. Like, honeybees are more than honey. Beeworks is more than honey. So we don't have a large interest in selling honey because to me it puts the emphasis on the wrong area. Our bigger producers, they're there for a reason. We need them. I'm not going to speak ill of that, but the care of the honeybee in those bigger outfits is not what I would deem acceptable. But that's just me. Yep.
So we have 2 questions and a comment. You kind of touched on it, but what is the most difficult part of small-scale beekeeping? What is the most expensive thing about it? And most importantly, thank you for sharing your passion and experience.
Expense would be startup.
Expense, yeah, startup. Like to get set up from scratch is,
Expensive.
yeah, it's
Hives are expensive.
you know,
Bees
you
are
can
expensive.
buy either pre-made hives or you can buy hive kits and put them together. They're generally a couple $100 per hive. Some of them come with frame kits, some of them don't. You also need all of your tools.
you
So
know,
there's a whole.
I feel like
tool of-
somewhere around 2 hives, an electric fence, I don't know who's watching on YouTube, if you don't have a wild animal that wants to get into your apiaries. I'm super jealous. But with an electric fence tool suit, probably around $1,500 to get started. I definitely recommend a mentor
Yeah,
or a lot of reading. So
Yeah.
buy a lot of books, read as much as you can. There's a lot going on. Beekeeping is rather time sensitive. So
yeah,
what I always say about beekeeping is if you can be a month, 6 weeks ahead of where like the weather and the seasons are gonna be, you'll be okay. If you're living for the moment, you're running in the
You're a
rears.
little
You're behind.
behind,
You're gonna
yeah.
be behind on what the bees are gonna be doing.
Yep.
So trying to stay one step
Yep.
ahead of them is good on that. And what was the first question?
Just what's the most difficult part for small scale beekeeping?
I think learning.
yeah, it is a steep learning
There's a
curve.
lot to do with every season. It's not the same from spring, summer, fall to winter to the
Yeah.
cycle all over again. Getting in tune with that rhythm and then balancing, as you pointed out, a personal life.
Yeah,
The more hives you have, less free time you're gonna have. Unlike a vegetable garden where you could probably have a neighbor water it if you went on vacation. Yeah, I don't think your neighbors are probably gonna wanna keep your bees unless they're,
I mean, the flip side of
already a
that is
beekeeper.
like, if you know, say in July, go on vacation for a week, it's like, if you've been dealing with your bees all right along, they're not just gonna up and leave
No.
most likely,
it's a
just,
ramp
you
up.
know.
You're gonna wanna do a lot of work leading
Right.
up to it.
It's like,
make
it's
sure they're good.
very, like, in chunks. It's a whole lot of work and then it's kinda quiet time, and then it's like some work and then it's quiet time, and then it's a whole lot of work again. So.
But then beekeeping is saying, oh, next week when things slow down, and it never gets there. I don't know if anyone's ever really gotten to know like a dairy farmer in their lives. I equate a lot of it to dairy farmers. I've known a few in my life, and most of them tell a similar story of like my first vacation as like a dairy farmer was 30 years into it. You don't do this on a whim at this level. You're very passionate about it. I don't like being away from my bees. I want to be in beehives every single day. You know, it takes a special breed of person.
It's true, but
keep
also if
going.
you have 1 or 2 hives, you're not gonna be in
They'll be
them
fine.
every single day.
They're fine.
That's not the level, cause there's also a bit of like, you gotta find the balance of managing them to
Leaving them alone.
messing with them.
Yeah.
Because if you're in there too much, that's also gonna make them feel kind of threatened, like their home is not really
They're home.
secure.
Yeah.
So you have to also find the balance. So if you're a backyard beekeeper that only has 2, maybe 4 hives, you're gonna be in there every few weeks. And then it's gonna be a gap of like, you just kind of keep an eye on them, but you're not actually fussing with them all the time.
And
So
each honeybee hive has its own
it's
genetics,
true.
and we call
They're
it
different.
personalities.
In the same apiary, you
Oh,
can
yeah.
have 2 completely
Some love being
different
worked,
experiences.
Some
Well,
attack
some
you
will
from
come
20 feet
straight for
away.
you if you get close to their stuff.
Most are somewhere in the middle, like you'll take the characteristics of say the Italian honeybee, or you're running a dark Germanic bee or anything like that. The characteristics to some degree are a good jumping off point. You kind of know what you're in for, but every single hive has its own personality. Absolutely. And you'll learn, oh, I'm going to so-and-so's house, and you're just like, oh man, that hive on
Get
the
the
left.
smoker ready.
Man, that hive on the left is
Get
gonna
the
whoop
smoker
me up.
ready.
Oh yeah, that's just the way they are. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Any other questions? Awesome, thank you guys.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Do you have business cards?
I think so. I was not prepared on that one.
He needs something like this. Oh, yeah. I'm surprised.
I'm not good at self-promoting.
We'll figure this out one of these times.
That's how we feel too.
Right, the technology bit?
No,